So, to celebrate 10 years of me being here, I thought I'd prepare something a little special. Guys, welcome back to Full Studio. You are looking straight into the past, a window through time, and truly a rare occasion because it's not often you get to see a near intact copy of a Modus project this old. This is the original June 2016 Crystal Clear. While this isn't the track that started it all, that'll be 2014's Heaven, which is a little harder to find on the internet, although still possible if you look hard enough. It's certainly what you would call a breakout. I consider it to be my first hit song. It's my first track to break every significant milestone you can think of. 1,000 plays, 10,000 plays, and right now it's on its way to 100,000 plays, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's very close. It's at about 98,000 last time I checked on SoundCloud. So yeah, go stream it. Let's get it there. This was voted by all of you yesterday on my Discord server. I ran a poll and asked you guys which of 5 Modus tracks from the past that never saw a project breakdown would you like to see. This was the winner. I think it's pretty appropriate, especially with how just a couple months ago we released Crystal Clearer, a new version of it, and my latest release as of today. The backstory for this one is that there is no backstory. This literally got done in the span of 2 days. I first came up with the idea on the shower and it just happened. You will see in just a minute this thing is actually surprisingly simple, and I believe that its simplicity is what made it so popular with you guys in the first place. So yeah, it's definitely one of those 1 in 1,000 ideas where everything just clicks. I think this was my first time experiencing that, and I'm happy it resonated with so many of you. Not many people know this, but this is actually technically a label release. It doesn't look like it when you go to the SoundCloud page on it, but it was first distributed as a release under the now defunct collective Delta Sigma, which was home to a couple other songs of mine at the time, like Tweak the Modus and Rise, I think. And it was premiered in a YouTube channel called Awoken Media, which was run by the same people who ran Deadlink, the label where I released the original No Return the following year in 2017, and then the VIP of that on the next in 2018. This kickstarted a lot of things in my career, and to say it has played a part in where we currently are would be an understatement. This was just after New Year Protocol 1. This was before I streamed. This was still in high school. A lot has changed since, so this is as exciting for you as it is for me to rediscover how I used to do things and how far we've come. But enough of me talking. There you have it. Crystal clear. So where do we start? From the beginning, we just have some bounce samples. I actually have no idea where these are from. I know I bounced these, so what I did here is back then, I didn't know about Reverb yet, so my go-to reverb plugin back then was Valhalla Shimmer. I don't have Valhalla Shimmer anymore on this computer, so I did go ahead and I replaced some of the effects with Reverb. So they sound almost the same, but not quite. But yeah, it's just for the purposes of the song sounding close to final. But yeah, in 2016, this Reverb would have been a Valhalla Shimmer on my old computer. I named the samples from the chords, G7, B flat 7. So it's all 7th chords except for this last one, which is a 6th chord, and that has that A, which is gonna keep on going till the next chord. All these 7ths and 6ths are made so there's a bit of an underlying melody within the chords. So we have dung, 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 right? And then because we didn't have this back then, there's just a volume automation on every single sample. So yeah, there it is. And then we have this same phrase again. But now there's a pluck on top. So looking at these chord samples, they just have a what you would call a band pass. So it's just a high pass and a low pass around 12K. I like how pretty much every channel redlines. Yeah, we will talk about that later. I was not very mindful of that back then. It was just, if you're not redlining, you ain't headlining. Let's talk about this plug now. Let's see what made it tick. I think from the title of the pattern, we can assume this was made in Sakura, right? Yep, there it is. Back when I used Sakura, look at that. This is ancient. You know it's ancient because I used this. Nowadays, for plugs, I tend to use either like Flex or Kepler. But yeah, this was like this synth that sounded really cool for like Asian type instruments with strings. It's on the Smooth Reed preset, and I actually have no idea if there's any modifications that I made from the original. It's probably the exact same preset. I touched Nothing in there. And then there was a reverb, which would be a shimmer. Now it's a total reverb. And there's just a high pass in there. The original sounds like this. And then I just added a total reverb. Really long reverb. 6.5 seconds. There's actually some cool timing in here at the end. That makes sense. But then the G in here. The A isn't actually the accent in here. The passing note is on the 1, which is kind of weird. I don't think I would have done this now. Since this is all reverbed out and there's no rhythmic element and the chord takes a little bit to build up, it actually feels like this A is the accent, but it really isn't, is that G. And there it is. That's the whole thing. There's just a volume automation here that's going to mute the whole thing. I automated the mixer track itself. So look at it. The volume is up and then it goes down. I would never do this now. I would never automate the actual fader in the mixer because I need this fader to control the actual gain, right? Because otherwise, if I wanted to control the volume of the sound, I would have to either go here or insert a Freddie balance. All these samples are all linked to a mixer track that has a D-Blue crusher in it. So just... So see that as I turn up the reduction, the automation, it creates this like 8-bit degradation, bit crushing sound. And that is accompanied by the saws and the sub bass and the middle bass. So if you look at that, it's just some super saws building up. And then we have the sub bass. It's a high C. Back then, I used a pure sine wave. Look at that. This is also something. Oh, and it's 3x oscillator. Paul, you have better ways to do it now. I would never do a pure sine wave now either. But yeah, it is there. And this is a middle bass between the saws and the sub. So see that? Anyway, let's get to the fun stuff. Oh, there's a reverse kick. As you can see, also, some things never change. I still use reverse kicks now to introduce a more powerful section of a track. There's some timing issues here, which I never bothered to fix back then. The concept of lining stuff up to the grid was still like a novel concept for me. All right, so the razor is actually bounced. But if you were to do it now, so here's how I probably did it. I inserted a razor. Aerosmith Rubber Wobbler is the razor preset that I always use, right? As you can see, it already sounds pretty different. Like, similar, sorry, Jesus. So just adjusting the face of the comp peak, you can already get pretty close. And then by adjusting the cutoff and the face, you can get pretty much the same motion, right? So we go. So yeah, you can get very, very close in just a few seconds with Reactor. The specific automation here just so happened to produce that. This is probably OTT'd to no end, or just has a very aggressive high-end boost. But this seems to work pretty well with the saws. Notice how I never cared to do a ramp down in the filter, so anytime this happened, I would get a click on the filter on the saws. See that massive click? See that low end that appears with the click on the filter? That's because the filter is after the EQ, so there is no high pass to prevent that low end from being in there. I guess the sidechain takes care of that, which, by the way, you're not seeing any sidechain triggers, are you? That's because I used to do sidechain pretty differently back then. I used to use a specific sample that would trigger a response in peak controller, and I just sidechained directly to each mixer track. So if you notice, anytime there's drums playing, there's a bunch of mixer tracks here that are gonna have the faders jumping up and down. See that? So I just sidechained track by track with a 40 peak controller. So this, anytime the kick played, it registered that peak. And I basically automated this to the mixer tracks. So they would bounce up and down based on this signal. That's how I used to do sidechain back then. It wasn't very optimized. Like it was very time consuming and it was just not a great way to do sidechain. So yeah, I just switched to MIDI based triggers soon after. So we have the razors, we have the saws. Let's have a look at what the saws are. Is this serum? It is serum. Look, oh, look at that. Modus music. Detuned saw. Oh man. There's the pattern. The pattern that started a career, or that kickstarted a career. So yeah, this sound, it's just a detuned saw wave in Serum. It was probably a much older version of Serum than it is now. I've updated it a bunch since. But the patch has indeed carried over, so yeah. It's just a saw wave with 11 unison voices and it's detuned a little bit less than normal. Like halfway through would be normal, so it's at about 40 to 35% detune. And that's really it. There is no effects, there is no nothing. Everything else happens on the mixer inserts. So there's just a high pass. There's an OTT, yeah, OTT on the saws. We were doing that all the way back in 2016. And as you can see, it was loud, it was redlining. And then we have that filter, which is just right here, right next to the saw. Nowadays, with projects, with my current projects, I just have a separate section of the project just for automations. I just bring it all down to automation hell, as I tend to say in my streams. But yeah, back then, I really had no rules for where to position anything. So it was all just this mess of you would find the sub bass like really high up in the playlist, and all the automations would be mixed in with samples and patterns. It was a hot mess. But yeah, when you play these two together, there it is. But now you might be noticing there's a bunch of gaps in here. What should we do in those gaps? Well, I had another saw patch, which was that. So it's a slightly harsher sounding saw. So this, would you look at that? It's quite massive, y'all. Modus Future Saw. So much for future. This is more than 8 years old at this point. Yeah, look at that. There was no effects, there was no reverb, no nothing, absolutely. There were just two oscillators, and that was really about it. It's interesting to see how the pitch of this is minus 0.05 semitones, and how this one is 1 octave up, plus 0.1 semitones. So there's a slight detune. So they're both an octave apart, but then they're slightly detuned from each other. So it causes a slight detune in there. Right? That's it. It's two oscillators and yeah. And then we have the mid bass. Yeah, it's just playing the bass notes. I think this is Harmer. No, it's not a massive preset, but there is one Harmer in here. So we do have a little bit more here. Let's try to decode what is happening here. We have all three oscillators on now. The three of them are square saw 1. That's the first of them. And it's just shy of an octave below. And then we have this other one. So notice how just having them 20 cents away from each other just causes this small detune. If we were to line them up, it would sound way more stable, right? But by spacing them out just a little bit, you get that slightly detuned sound without having to add any unison voices or anything like that. And then we have this other one, which is just the same oscillator, but on the square position instead of soft. And it's 2 octaves down. And then we just have the sub. Sub is exactly what you think it is. Just a pure sine wave. And I still low passed it, even though it's a pure sine wave for some reason. And then look at that. There's an OTT on the sub, even though it's a pure sine wave and it can't be compressed past what it is. Because, well, you can't compress a pure sine wave further. I guess I didn't know that back then. So I think we have all of the elements now, save for the drums maybe. Well, back then, I actually did patterns with the drums. So here we have the channel rack. If you look at this, there's actually things in here. We have a crash. This is long before the AU5 crash huge era. So I just have a Vengeance dubstep pack crash. And that's what it is. We have a kick. I think this is from a pack called Damned Essentials. Damned Essentials. Drums. There it is. DMB. Kick 1. Exactly. That's the crystal clear kick, y'all. So I also have what I called a pre-tail. Just a fade-in noise sweep for the snare. which was the damned essential drums, dubstep snare 3 in that case. So back to that same pack. You can see the tail used to be much longer, and that, I guess, I thought it didn't fit in the song, so I just shortened the tail quite a bit. And we have a white noise sweep. This is literally just a white noise oscillator. So as you can see, there's no oscillators turned on except for the noise oscillator, so it's just white noise. They had a filter on it. That was it. And then I just had some crashes. More crashes. So this was like the big crash, and then I had a smaller, like shorter crash for the drums to hit more often, I guess. So that crash went on every kick hit, and now there's the big crash in here. So when we play the whole thing together, as you can see, there's very little reverb to speak of. This whole thing is pretty dry. So now we have a snare roll here. And back then, I never cared to just do an automation clip and gradually raise the pitch. I just did it directly on the panel roll, just raised the snare a semitone. And that's how I did build-ups back then. See that? But it works, I guess, so yeah. There's a crash on every hit. And there it is. And there's some more Vengeance reversed downlifters. These are downlifters, but I reversed them to make uplifters out of them. Yeah. Same thing. But now the hard saws have changed a little bit. So now there's some faster motions in there and some added notes. And now from a D9, we go into a D7 at 9 at 11, probably. Yeah, lots of added notes in there. There's a snare in here. Big ass snare, also with the tail a little bit cut in there. And we have a lead that does a little solo before we hop into the first drop. So yeah, there's two patches going into this. One, it's actually a saw bass, which is a Hummer patch. This is actually very similar to what ended up being an engine start in 2020, 4 years later. This was very close to the main sound. You know? But it's a couple octaves higher. So it's so high that it pretty much becomes a lead at that point. So you combine that with a higher octave, which is a Virtual Riot lead Hummer patch that I believe I found in a YouTube tutorial on how to make a Virtual Riot type lead. I just found the Hummer patch, I downloaded it, and I actually don't know if I made any modifications. After all, this is a little bit blurry. So I had those two patches. And that's how the drop starts. Very simple, very functional, very bare bones. And the drop is just the buildup, but with drop drum. So it's basically the same layers that we have, but now there's some hats added. See what those hats are. Again, we have some more Vengeance sounds. Back then, this is pretty much all I had. I had a bunch of Vengeance packs, and that was just most of my sample library back. We gotta talk about this. I actually didn't know how to end this phrase, so I really struggled. I think I spent a few hours trying to come up with what to do here, and I just came up with this weird thing at the end, and I think my brain was so burned at that point that I was like, yeah, just whatever, just keep it. And it ended up just sounding kind of funny, but like in not a too bad way. So we have an F major 7 that turns into an F major 7 at 9. And then we have a C major 7, which is a tritone. That's probably why this sounds a little weird to the ear. And then there's an E minor 7th, and then there's a F sus2, and then there's another F sus2 add 6. So we have a 6th added in there. It almost implies that we're in a different key. That's why it ends up sounding a little bit jazz. Now we head to a B phrase, right? So So whereas the first time we were going up, nan, dun, 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 nan, nan, nan. Now we're going down, nan, 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 nan. So we have once again in the razor. And then we have the saws on every little gap in there. So it's almost like we have a call and response between the soft saws and the hard saws. And then we just have this lead. There's a tiny bit of vibrato in there. So there's an automation here that tells it after a certain time playing a sustained note, turn up the vibrato, right? And that's why the note gets a little bit more gritty as it progresses here. And would you look at that? So we have an EQ, and then look at this. We had a sausage fattener in there. I don't have sausage fattener anymore, but it was there. And just for the sake of preservation, I never thought to replace it. I don't know how it would have sounded in isolation with the sausage fattener. Like maybe not all that different probably. And then we have just the slightest bit of fruity reverb. It's very, very subtle. As you can see, the lead matches the patterns of the super saws. We have the same underlying rhythm, but now there's some notes that are sprinkled in there. No, 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 no. But yeah, in essence, it's the same rhythm. So this is kind of like the call of the lead, and the lead basically replies to itself with a slightly different phrase. So now we go back to the first phrase, but now we're gonna add in some growls. So yeah, same theme now in the gaps. Instead of doing the hard saws, now we're doing some growls. Let's have a look at what these growls are. They're probably all presets. Like back then, my notion of doing my own sound design was a little bit lost, let's say. So we have a certain serum sound. Have a look at that. This is probably from some cymatics pack. So yeah, it's just one oscillator with this weird wavetable and then a bandpass. And it's having the bandpass move up. And then there was a sausage fattener on here as well. And they have this. That's pretty interesting. What is that? It's another serum, isn't it? Yeah. It's probably from another cymatics pack. Complex vowel generator. Chances are I might have changed up this LFO to create a different motion, but I have no idea. This is massive. Screamy, wobble, slow, and that is pretty loud. So if we turn this down, let's see what we get. And then if we turn it down an octave, we get that. That's pretty fat, honestly. We have Look at this. It's a culprit bass. This is a find. They have culprit signature bass. So it's 3 oscillators. There's that. S yard. That. And then that. Probably there's some kind of, yeah, band pass, band reject, phasing going on, and when you combine the 3. So notice how also we have this slight detune in each. So they're not exactly 2 octaves down. They're separated just a tiny bit. These 2 oscillators are just a few cents from each other. Right? It just creates this detuned feeling to it. Apparently there were some effects things in here. But I turned them off. I guess because I didn't need such grit in that bass because it was just like an ARP bass. Yeah. There are some hard saws in there, but then there's where the bam bam would go. Now we have this wobble. Probably another cymatic sound. There it is. Same thing, but now bam 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 bam. Same thing, different lead. Yeah, we have a little bit more add-ons, decorations. We have this massive cool down, some claps coming in, and the breakdown comes in. Let's have a look at this. So this is back when I used to use this thing called Magical 8-bit plug. This is a free VST that just has the most basic waves, sine, square, triangle, pulse, and it's just made for like 8-bit, like chiptune. We have the bass. Let me see. That's not the bass, but it is a triangle wave. This is like an add-on melody. So it has a bit of string. And now there's that bass. I did 2 octaves, so I just did 1 octave and just copied the whole thing and just brought it up 1 octave. It follows the same string pattern. Dun, 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 dun. And for the melody, I actually did use 3x oscillator. Notice the massive aliasing artifacts. If I turn on the HQ, sounds so much cleaner now. So yeah, this didn't exist in 3x oscillator back then. When you combine everything, they're all leveled in a way that the melody always stays on top. So the chords and the triangle wave never get in the way of the melody. And the drums, oh, we have some claps in there. So let's see. This is the noise sweeper. Okay. So we have an FPC here. It's probably used for what exactly? For the hi-hats. Interesting. And a tambourine. We have this small kick. And we have a clap. Well, a hat and a clap. Trap clap, there it is. This is like the quintessential trap clap. And then what's happening is every 4 bars, there's like a big crash in there. This is the equivalent of AU5 crash huge back then. And now, add to the 8-bit section, there's even more sub bass. So the sub bass from the drop joins the 8-bit section. And now the triangle wave actually goes up an octave higher to portray that like sense of build-up, sense of tension rising, right? Go back to the whole thing. We have this and the sub bass running. So that's a lot more bassy, you know? There's some automations here that are high passing the clap probably. It's here probably. Yeah. See that? So the clap was being brought in. It started high pass and then it came back in. So in a way, we start this and then this whole thing opens up in both directions. So the bass goes even lower and the melodies go even higher. So the whole thing widens. Right. Same build up from the beginning. Now we have that iconic melody. So that lead stays with us for that whole phrase. And just stays there, right? And now we have this progression. This is the same lead as the solos in the first drop. Now they're just an octave lower. Build up. Some more hats in there. The snare roll, again, just the snare just going up in semitones. I had no sense of pitch automation back then. Same way I started the first drop, just a snare and a lead solo. But now the break is a little shorter. So yeah, it's basically the same theme. Na, 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 na. But it doesn't have the lead anymore. So yeah, and now there's that double octave solo, once again using the lead and the faux saw bass. It's all the same thing, very fast notes followed by a phrase, and then once again, and then again, right? So it all follows the same pattern. The pattern repeats, the notes within the pattern change. And now it retreats to the same melody. And now it bridges back into that theme. So the first time this theme appears in the drop, it doesn't actually resolve with that major D. Instead, it does a D sus4. Na 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 with a G, that fourth in there. Na 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 na. So it's not quite resolved yet. Now it's resolved, right? Now for that last phrase, we finally get that resolution to that D major. Just a massive fade out. Finally having resolved into that D major. And then there's just a little bit of calm in the reverb. And then just this turn off sound, like when you turn off your TV or something, and that's when the song ends. What would I have done differently? The mix, probably the mix. Not so much the song. The structure of the song is actually pretty okay. It's pretty fun. Maybe I would have changed a couple notes about the solo now, but yeah, I don't really know what I would have done now. So yeah, guys, that was crystal clear.